My entire life has been a collection of symptoms without a name. A story written in a language no one could read. It began as a child with a fatigue so profound it felt like my bones were filled with lead. It grew into a constellation of strange, migrating pains, odd sensitivities to light and sound, and dizzy spells that would steal the world from under my feet. I have lived my life through a haze, a constant low-grade fog of feeling unwell, a state of being that had become my normal. The worst part wasn't the pain itself. It was the doubt. The quiet, insidious suggestion, planted by everyone around me, that the sickness wasn't real, that it was all in my head. And the chief gardener of that poisonous idea was my grandmother, Elara Vance. To the world, she was a titan of biomedical engineering, a brilliant mind who had retired early to manage her vast family fortune. To me, she was my caregiver, my guardian, the sole, unwavering authority on my health after my parents passed away when I was young. Her concern was a suffocating blanket. When a debilitating wave of nausea left me bedridden for 3 days last month, she sat by my bed, stroking my hair. "Oh, my precious Chloe," she'd murmured, her voice dripping with sympathy. "Your mind is so powerful. It can create such vivid physical sensations when you're under stress. We just need to teach you how to quiet the anxiety." Anxiety. That was her favorite diagnosis. For 20 years, I was taken to a parade of specialists, all old colleagues of hers, all the best in their field. They were charming, patient men who would run batteries of tests, and the results were always the same. "The tests are all clear, Chloe," they'd say, leaning back in their leather chairs. "Your grandmother is right. You are a perfectly healthy young woman. Perhaps we should explore some therapeutic options for your anxiety." I was medically gaslit into believing I was a hypochondriac. The family, taking their cues from her, treated me like fragile glass. "Don't upset. Chloe, you know how she gets. Is it one of your spells, dear?" I was the family's resident neurotic, a constant source of worry, a burden. I began to doubt myself, to hate the weakness of a mind I believed was inventing its own pain. Her control was absolute. When a young, ambitious doctor once suggested my symptoms might point to a rare mitochondrial disorder, my grandmother dismissed him as a sensationalist quack, and we never saw him again. She personally managed my diet, my supplements, my environment, all under the guise of a grandmother's loving, meticulous care. She was my only hope for getting better, and, I now realize, the absolute guarantee that I never would. Her death was sudden, a massive stroke in her sleep. One moment she was the unshakable pillar of my life. The next, she was gone. The grief was disorienting, but beneath it, a tiny, shameful seed of hope began to sprout. Without her influence, without her hand-picked doctors, maybe now I could finally find a real answer. Maybe now I could get well. The will reading was a shock. My family had assumed, given my fragile nature, that my inheritance would be a carefully managed trust. They were audibly stunned when Mr. Abernathy announced that my grandmother had left me everything, her entire vast, staggering fortune with no conditions. Their resentment was a palpable force in the room. Why would she leave her empire to the broken one? Then came the final bequest. "To my granddaughter Chloe," the lawyer read, "I leave my old black leather doctor's bag, which she knows so well. Everything you need to understand your own nature is inside." My blood ran cold. That bag. It was her constant companion, filled with the supplements and strange herbal remedies she was always testing on me. The family saw it as a final, sentimental insult. But I heard a threat. A cryptic, chilling piece of medical advice from beyond the grave. Understand my own nature? What did that mean? What did she know that she had never told me? The bag wasn't a comfort. It felt like her final diagnosis, the last word on the sickness she had so lovingly curated my entire life. If you've ever felt like no one believed your pain, like it was all in your head, hit that like button. You have no idea how real the sickness was, or why she kept it a secret. I finally found the courage to open the bag on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The vast, empty mansion I had inherited felt cold and silent, the perfect setting for confronting a ghost. I laid the black leather doctor's bag on the polished surface of my grandmother's massive mahogany desk. My hope, a fragile, flickering thing, was that I would find answers inside. A referral to a specialist she never told me about, a hidden diagnosis, a letter explaining that she knew, that she was sorry. The truth was infinitely more monstrous than my most fearful imaginings. As the brass latches clicked open, the familiar smell of antiseptic and old leather wafted out. The top layer was organized with a terrifying clinical precision. There were dozens of small glass vials filled with a dark liquid, each labeled with a date and a series of numbers. With a sickening lurch in my stomach, I realized it was my blood. A lifetime of blood draws, cataloged like a wine collection. There were boxes of microscope slides, each with a tiny smeared sample. My life, reduced to data points. There was a thick logbook detailing my vitals, my diet, my sleep patterns, every reported symptom, going back to my infancy. It was the obsessive record-keeping of a dedicated researcher, not a loving grandmother. This was strange. This was invasive. But it wasn't until I found the false bottom that the true horror began to unfold. Beneath a layer of medical instruments, a section of the bag lifted away, revealing a hidden compartment. And inside were 6, heavy, leather-bound, journals, blank on the cover, with no titles to hint at the nightmares they contained. They felt less like diaries and more like ancient forbidden grimoires. I opened the first one. The first entry was dated the week I was born. The handwriting was hers, but the voice was one I had never known. It was the voice of Dr. Ilara Vance, a brilliant renegade biologist, and the tone was cold, detached, and filled with a terrifying scientific excitement. "Initial blood work on Subject C is conclusive," she wrote. "The genetic anomaly is present and fully expressed. A unique protein sequence resulting in unprecedented cellular regeneration, but with significant systemic costs. The subject will likely experience chronic fatigue, inflammation, and neurological sensitivity, a perfect, self-sustaining specimen. The project can begin. Subject C. My name is Chloe, but the birth date she listed was mine. As I read on, a cold dread began to creep from the base of my spine, spreading like ice through my veins. She detailed the subject's symptoms through infancy, through childhood, the fevers, the aches, the dizzy spells. They were all there, a perfect mirror of my own medical history. I was Subject C. I was the specimen. I grabbed another journal, my hands shaking, uncontrollably. My eyes scanned the pages, landing on an entry from my 16th birthday. June 12, 2015. Experiment 4B. Hypothesis: environmental allergens may act as a catalyst for protein expression. Introduced concentrated dust mite and pollen particulates into subject's ventilation system overnight. Subject exhibited severe migraine, extreme photosensitivity, and nausea for 72 hours. Vitals logged. Excellent data. An effective stimulus. I dropped the book as if it had burned me. That weekend, it was the worst migraine of my life. I had been in a dark room for 3 days, crying in agony, and she had sat by my bed, stroking my hair, telling me it was just teenage hormones while she was secretly taking notes. My suffering was her data. My pain was her project. I tore through the other journals, a frantic, desperate scavenger hunt through the wreckage of my own life. It was all there. The doctors I saw were her old, compliant colleagues, briefed to dismiss my symptoms. Met with Dr. Martin today. Reinforced the psychosomatic narrative. He is fully on board. The dozens of inconclusive tests were by design, screening for everything except the one thing she knew was there. The herbal remedies she gave me weren't medicine. They were variables. Administered compound 7B, a potent ginkgo biloba extract, to test its effect on neural conductivity. Subject reported increased tinnitus and joint pain, but EEG shows a 15% increase in theta wave activity. Promising. She hadn't been trying to cure me. She had been cultivating my illness, managing it, using it. I finally reached for the last journal, the most recent one. Her theories had become more grandiose, more unhinged. She wrote that she believed my unique genetic anomaly, the protein my body produced, was the key to unlocking directed evolution. It could be used to regenerate any tissue, cure any degenerative disease. She wrote, with a chilling lack of hyperbole, that it was the key to radical life extension, to biological immortality. Then I read the final entry, dated the week before her stroke. My blood turned to ice. The subject is reaching peak cellular viability. The anomaly is fully expressed and stable. The years of data collection are complete. The project is ready for its apotheosis. The next phase is critical. The procedure to harvest the primary stem cell cluster from the subject's bone marrow must be scheduled within the month. The subject's cooperation is, of course, irrelevant. All preparations for the transfer are in place. The triumph of a lifetime is at hand. I stared at the words, unable to breathe. Harvest. Transfer. Apotheosis. She wasn't just going to let me be sick. She had a final procedure planned. An ending. She was going to harvest me. My body, my life, was not my own. It was the raw material for her magnum opus. I wasn't her granddaughter. I was a crop she had spent a lifetime growing, and she was, finally, ready to reap what she had sown. For days after the discovery, I was a ghost haunting a mausoleum. The grand mansion I had inherited felt like a gilded cage, and I, the prized specimen within it. I would look at my own hands, my own skin, with a sickening sense of detachment. This body was not mine. It was a laboratory. My pain was not my own. It was a data point. My entire life, every moment of suffering, had been a meticulously recorded experiment. The word harvest echoed in the silent halls, a promise of a future I had narrowly escaped only by the random chance of a stroke. The love I once felt for my grandmother was a dead thing, and in its place was a profound existential horror that threatened to unmake me completely. In my haze of grief and revulsion, a new, cold clarity began to dawn. The inheritance. The staggering, world-spanning fortune she had left me. I had thought it a shock, a mystery. Now I understood it with perfect, chilling lucidity. It was not an apology. It was not an act of love. It was the project's final round of funding. She hadn't left me a fortune to live on. She had left me the infrastructure to continue her life's work. The lawyers, the accountants, the offshore accounts, the network of biomedical suppliers. It was all the machinery of the experiment. And she had just handed the keys to the lead specimen. This realization sent me back to the black leather bag one last time. If this was a laboratory, then surely there had to be more than just research notes. There had to be a manual. In my previous frantic search, I had missed one final detail. The bag had a thick, reinforced bottom plate. I found a tiny, almost invisible switch near the hinge. Pressing it, I heard a soft click, and the entire bottom of the bag detached, revealing a slim, watertight, locked medical case. Inside, I found it. The owner's manual to my own biology. It wasn't a collection of theories. It was a practical guide. Dozens of files, filled with specific biochemical protocols, detailed dietary regimens, and environmental control parameters. It was a step-by-step guide to me. There were blueprints and access codes to a place I never knew existed. A state-of-the-art, fully automated biomedical lab, built into a cliffside on a remote private island she owned in the Aegean. And in those notes, I found two distinct paths laid out before me, 2 futures. The first was labeled Suppression Protocol. It was a short, simple regimen, a series of gene therapies and chemical suppressants that would, according to her notes, effectively turn off the anomaly. It would halt the regenerative properties, and with them, the debilitating side effects. It was a path to normalcy, a chance to live a simple, pain-free, but ultimately mortal and unremarkable life. It was an escape. The second set of files was far thicker, far more complex, and infinitely more seductive. It was labeled Apotheosis Protocol. This was not a cure. This was an activation. It was a detailed multi-year plan to not just manage the anomaly, but to master it, to eliminate the negative side effects while maximizing the regenerative potential. Her notes described how to use the fortune to synthesize specific proteins, how to use gene editing technology to stabilize the mutation, how to harness the very power that had caused me so much pain. Her final projections were the stuff of science, fiction. An end to all disease, the cessation of aging, a life unbound by normal human frailties. And there, I stood at the ultimate crossroads. A choice. For my entire life, others had chosen for me. The doctors, my family, and above all, my grandmother. Now, for the first time, I had a choice, and it would define not just my future, but my very nature. I could choose normalcy. I could take the cure, sell the island, donate the fortune to charity, and spend the rest of my life trying to forget that I was ever a prisoner in my own body. I could be free of her, free of the pain, free of the project. But what was that freedom? The freedom to be weak again? The freedom to be like everyone else? After a lifetime of being told my pain wasn't real, the thought of returning to a normal life, a life of ordinary weakness, felt like a surrender. Or I could take her monstrous gift and make it my own. I could take this curse that she had cultivated in my blood and turn it into my crown. I could walk the path she had laid out, not as her lab rat, but as her successor. The thought was intoxicating. After a lifetime of being weak, of being a fragile, sickly girl in the eyes of the world, the promise of absolute strength, of a life without pain, of power beyond imagination. It was a powerful lure. The desire for a normal life faded, replaced by a new burning ambition. The desire for control, the desire for transcendence. She used me as a subject. Fine. The subject is now the lead researcher. She saw me as a means to an end. Fine. I will become the end. I will finish the work, not to vindicate her name, but to claim my own power. My weakness would become my weapon. My illness would become my apotheosis. I closed the file for the suppression protocol and began to memorize the first steps of my new life. My first action was not one of healing, but of erasure. Over the course of one swift, brutal week, I used a fraction of my grandmother's vast fortune to systematically dismantle the life of Chloe Vance. I liquidated accounts, fired the family's lawyers and accountants, and funneled the liquid assets into a new, untraceable corporate identity. I became a ghost, leaving behind only confused relatives and a legal maze they would spend years trying to navigate. My final destination was the one place on Earth I could truly be myself, the hidden laboratory on her private Aegean island. When my chartered helicopter landed on the cliffside platform, I felt like I was coming home for the first time in my life. The lab was not the dark, Gothic dungeon of my imagination. It was a temple of science, gleaming white walls, state-of-the-art equipment, and panoramic windows looking out over the endless blue sea. It was a sanctuary, built by a monster, but a sanctuary nonetheless. For months, I did nothing but immerse myself in her research. I was no longer a passive subject. I became the lead scientist of the most exclusive and intimate experiment in the world. The test subject was me. With my own blood under the microscope, I saw the anomaly for what it was: beautiful, terrifying, and full of unimaginable potential. Following the meticulous protocols she had left in her apotheosis files, I began. My hands didn't even shake as I prepared the first self-administered injection, a synthesized protein designed not to suppress, but to stabilize and enhance the mutation. I pressed the needle into my own arm, and as the cold liquid entered my veins, I felt a lifetime of pain begin to recede. The transformation was not instantaneous. It was a gradual, powerful awakening. The first thing to go was the fatigue, the profound, bone-deep weariness that had been my constant companion since childhood simply evaporated. It was replaced by a vibrant, humming energy that felt like staring into the sun. Then the pains vanished, the aches in my joints, the migraines, all gone. My senses sharpened. Colors became more vivid, the blue of the sea outside my window so intense it almost hurt to look at. I could hear the individual cry of each seagull from a mile away. I was not just being healed, I was being remade. I was evolving. Ilara was right. This wasn't a sickness. It was a gift. A terrifying, monstrously obtained gift, but a gift nonetheless. My old life, however, was not yet finished with me. After nearly a year of my disappearance, my family, furious at their loss of control over the fortune, managed to track me down. They arrived by helicopter, unannounced, a small invasion force of concerned relatives and their lawyers, likely armed with a court order to have me declared mentally incompetent. They expected to find the frail, sickly girl they had always known, perhaps wasting away in a drug-addled haze. The person they met on the landing platform was not the Chloe they remembered. I was no longer pale and thin. I was radiating a level of health and vitality that was almost unnerving. I stood before them, not with fear or anger, but with the serene, detached curiosity of a scientist observing a lesser species. "Chloe, thank God," my aunt cried, rushing forward. "We were so worried. You're not well. We're here to take you home, to get you help." I simply raised a hand, and she stopped, stunned by the quiet authority in the gesture. "Help?" I asked, my voice calm and clear. I have never felt better in my life. I have in fact cured myself, thanks to the final research my grandmother left me. My Uncle Richard stepped forward, his face red with frustration. "This is nonsense. You're unstable. We have a court order. Your court order is based on the testimony of doctors my grandmother paid to lie to you for 20 years, I said matter-of-factly. "And your concern is not for my health, but for your access to my bank accounts, which is now permanently terminated." I looked him in the eye. "By the way, you should have your own doctor look at that mole on your neck. Based on its cellular discoloration, I'd say it has a 93.7% chance of being a stage 2 melanoma. You should have it biopsied immediately." The color drained from his face. How could I possibly know that? The truth was, with my enhanced senses, I could literally see the diseased cells under his skin. They retreated, stumbling back toward their helicopter. Not in anger anymore, but in genuine, primal fear. I was no longer just their niece. I was something else, something they could not understand or control. I now stand in the heart of my laboratory, looking at a holographic display of my own cellular structure. The cells glow with a healthy golden light, regenerating at a rate that defies all known biology. I am the culmination of Ilara's obsession. She used me, yes. She violated me in the most fundamental way imaginable. But in doing so, she gave me a power that she could only dream of. I am no longer her victim. I am no longer her subject. I am her successor. I have become both the scientist and the successful experiment. The obsession has been passed down, and her work will continue. But it will continue for my own ends, not hers. My grandmother wanted to use my illness to change the world. She succeeded. She changed me. And now, I will change the world. My grandmother wanted to use my illness to change the world. She succeeded. She changed me. Subscribe to see what happens when the experiment takes control.